Good evening. This is Defacto Review, a weekly analysis of Mongolia's latest political, economic, and social issues by economist and columnist Mr. Jaral Sahin.
Good evening.
And I'll be your host, Tikshirut. Today's topics are the people's protests against coal theft, the repayment of the Chingis bond, and the party conferences that were held this week. So our first topic is a very important one, as Mongolian people are protesting for the sixth day in a row in Ulaanbaatar. So the protest started as there was speak of an investigation led by the Independent Authority Against Corruption of Mongolia, also known as the Anti-Corruption Agency, that there was a group list of people who were connected to a coal theft investigation. There were reports of discrepancy between the amount of coal exported from Mongolia to China and the imports reported by the People's Republic of China. But contrary to popular belief, the Chief Cabinet Secretary Amr Baysakhling announced that the information of the inspection of Erzincan's finding that 6.4 million tons of coal worth 40 trillion MNT were illegally exported is false. But he then confirmed that 385,000 tons of coal went missing between 2013 and 2019. And these protests are still happening today. It's on its sixth day today as of Friday. And these protests come months after the Do Your Job protest that also sparked a lot of headlines this past April. And so let's talk about this information that came out. So there are a lot of numbers. People are saying 40 trillion MNT was embezzled, 44 trillion, 440 trillion. So where did these numbers emerge from in the first place?
Well, that's something that the government officially has to be exact, because there are really different sources. And therefore, not only Mongolians, but foreign media also is confused. So this is the figure that we need to be very exact. The state should make it clear. According to Mr. Amr Baysakhling, if it is 6.5 million tons of coal, then it's, if you multiply by around $100 per ton, then it's around 650 million USD dollar. It's less than $1 billion US dollar. So we need to be exact. But however, whatever was the figure, one thing is clear, that there are thousands or maybe millions of tons are lost or stolen, because the figures of border police, customs are different. With Chinese customs, which is still coming, the figure, but still different with the one what we have. So it's no doubt that there is a big theft of coal, and this was the last point where people decided to go to the street, because there were so many other scandals of corrupt cases in Mongolia for the last 2 or 3 years. And that's why people have to come out. But concerning this theft of coal, people are in particular resisting and against this theft, and many days the protesters, in particular young people, are standing in this cold weather.
Well, regardless of the volume, there were 9 people that have been arrested so far, including the former CEO of Erzincan. So do you think that there are going to be more arrests or detainments in the future?
Or if everybody who is really involved will be arrested, there will be, I think, hundreds of arrests. But however, arresting somebody, and in particular hold responsible, give penalty, all is to be made by the court decisions, prosecutors' decisions to be arrested, and court decisions to have a penalty. So it should be within the law, because it's a country at the end, rule of law country, or at least must be a rule of law country. It may take some time. However, our court system or judicial system is really working in a worst way, because really some cases are staying there for maybe from 5 to 10 years, and after a certain time period elapsed, they call it the time for the period of investigation is expired, and many criminals just leave because the term is finished. So it's actually a matter of a fight for justice, which is not protected or secured by our judiciary system.
Mm-hmm. So in this fight, a lot of young people, thousands, tens of thousands of them, are going out into the streets to protest against this government. As you've said, especially in the freezing cold. So there have been people that have demonstrated in a lot of different ways. There have been people who have stripped naked at negative 30 degrees. There are people who have shaved their, like women who have shaved their hair to save money on shampoo, because that's how bad it is for them. Also, there are other people that have demonstrated while throwing things at the Prime Minister. So what do you think about the protests that are going on right now? Do you think that it will continue into the future?
I think it will go on until the government, or in particular the cabinet, is doing what they are doing. And by the way, they are much accelerating their jobs for the last few days, and they should go in that way. And I think demonstration will continue until at least the tangible result comes. But unfortunately, it may take some time, but needs that justice to be set. In short term, there are several things to be made. In short term, should be disclosure of the names of those who were stealing, and that should be a very long list, because this corruption was going on for maybe more than 10 years now. So it should be. It's not only the matter of the theft of coal. There are many other stealing from the state property. First, secondly, the parliament says that it will have public hearing on December 21st, almost 2 weeks from now. No need to wait for that long, because these young people will have even more cold, difficult days. So they should be immediately this public hearing. The third, the take-off contracts of coal from Tavan Talgoi Erdines Tavan Talgoi company should be revealed, opened immediately. That president the president is the only person who can disclose that agreements under confidentiality stamp. So until this three thing happens, people, I think, will stay in a very short-term actions. So in midterm, what is to be made is all the state-owned enterprises to be restructured, if possible through the public company, so that majority of shares owned by public who can control, unlike now, where Erdnes Tavan Talgoi is the only company that has this kind of problems. No, all state-owned enterprises have the same problem. Another thing in midterms to be made is, I think, the two political parties, the ruling party in particular, looks like agreed to make first constitutional new amendments toward more parliamentarian system, and also to be election system of the country to be changed. It probably must be a mixed system where all people of Mongolia represented equally to the parliament. The third thing is, and it must be done, is reform of political parties, particularly through their law, and political party laws to be adopted, adopted as soon as possible. So these three things, unless made, people, I think, will not be calm anymore.
Let's move on to our second topic for this week. So this past Tuesday, the Prime Minister announced that the government had repaid the country's first ever sovereign bond in full, and 1/3 of the $1.5 billion bond had to be paid in 2018, and the rest in 2022. So we've paid back the bond in time with the transfer of the remaining $136 million. And the bond was issued in 2012, And in 2014, the government said that it would allocate $216 million to provide loans to businesses in the primary export industries of mineral and Kashmir. And the bond was initially issued at an interest rate of either 4.1% or 5.1%. And over the period of 10 years, Mongolia has paid $540 million in interest for this bond, meaning 1/3 of the bond of the initial loan was paid back in interest. And if we're thinking about it in MNT, in Tugruks, we've paid nearly triple since the value of the Tugruk depreciated a lot. So 10 years is a long time, because when the bond was first issued, it was the USD, $1 costs between 1,300 to 1,400 Tugruks, but now we're at 3,400. So in the grand scheme of things, do you think that this bond was fruitful?
No, not at all. In fact, Minister of Finance announced it on 5th of December this year, a few days ago, that they have paid completely the Chingis Khan bond. Mm-hmm. Yes, de jure you paid, but de facto no. Because the $1.2 billion out of $1.5 billion Chingis bond are staying in the form of different bonds with beautiful names like Samurai, like Mazalai. They have been. I'm just wondering why they would call the huge foreign debt with the name of Chingis Khan. I was from the beginning surprised, and they said that, look, you borrowed money, and why you would call Chingis' name. By the way, Chingis never was borrowing, I believe, money. And now you borrow money, and plus you are paying it with another bond, and this is quite political actions of politicians. So, as you said, for $1.5 billion we paid already for 10 years $540 million as interest rate, and only $264 million for principal. $264 billion. That means $1.2 billion are still in the form of other bonds, as I said earlier.
So they paid off debt with other debt?
With debt. So it's one issue. The second issue, for example, how we have used that. 60% of the whole money proceeds come through the budget, different budget expenses. 15% went through commercial banks. The remaining went to different state-owned projects. One of the bank, for example, projects which got a loan through Development Bank of Mongolia, it made now 500 billion MNT worth bad loan. This is around, at that course, around more than $200 million of Chingis bond means went or gone as a bad loan. Somebody is not paying that. So with this kind of crazy bad management, the government has no right to have any more bond, because actually this Chingis bond is not paid by the government. It's by us, by taxpayers. So from now on, it also looks like this government made decisions that we will not borrow anymore from international capital market with high interest loan. I mean, thanks God they say that now. But really, in fact, with such a bad management, they're borrowing money and paying it with another debt. As a result, the next generation pay, like the Prime Minister Alton Hoyek from the very beginning, he said, that, we will borrow it, the next generation will pay it. Exactly that's what's happening after 10 years. So it's impossible to tolerate. That's one of the reasons, by the way, the people are standing there, not saying clearly, but it's the foreign debt of Mongolian government. So the issue is now what they have been used, and the very bad loans, and plus those who misconducted the Chingis Khan bond proceeds. They having any responsibility, not held for responsible for that loss. Why? Because they have been investigating, but the investigation period had expired according to our law. So the guy goes now like a free bird, burning so much public money and enjoying good life. And that's one of the injustice people are fighting against now.
How much debt are we going to pay back next year? Because we have a set amount that we have to pay for next year as well.
Well, this government more or less succeeding to pay on time. Out of 1.8 trillion MNT bad loan, which is more than half of the development bank loan, has gone as goes as a bad loan. But they have been demanding and working hard for the last 2-3 months, or about half a year. Then they got now 800 billion MNT back out of these bad loans. In that way, they are ready now to pay Chingis bond, development bank bonds or debt, which had a guarantee from the government. Now they are able to pay according to the Minister of Finance. It looks like they will pay on time all this debt. But however, many of them, as I said earlier, is money coming from another debt. So we need to be very clear about actually it's who is paying that debt at the end.
Let's move on to our final topic for this week. The People's Party of Mongolia was scheduled to hold its party conference this past Tuesday, December 6th, but it was postponed due to the people's protests against the state. There was an expectation of replacing the general secretary of the party, since the current secretary, Mr. Amar Baisaklang, holds a post in the government. And on the same day, the Democratic Party held its party congress and discussed internal party issues and changes to party rules and the state of Mongolian society in general. And 420 members attended the conference in person, and 517 attended it virtually. So why are these party conferences important to the Mongolian people? Why does it matter?
People's Party and Democratic Party are two parties that are replacing each other, sometimes creating coalition and running the country for the last 30 years. So their Congress is very important for important events, not only for their party, but for the whole public. First, about this Democratic Party. The Democratic Party had extraordinary Congress, 15th Congress, which was extraordinary. Extraordinary because now public and I think the political party members also themselves are confused who are real head of these political parties. They're divided into 2 or 3 faction now, and it is not clear for everybody, but Mr. Erden, who had called that extraordinary Congress, is officially looks like he is the head of the political party. It's a very pity that the most strong opposition party in such a situation, and not clear, united platform to be truly opposition power in the country, which we are missing. And that's why out of 76, this People's Party has 62 seats, and they can do everything because it's a supermajority now. So without proper opposition party, democracy doesn't work well. That's Mongolia's clear example now. So, but the People's Party Congress, or small Horal, they have postponed because this demonstration. However, their board have had a meeting and they have agreed to more support the Prime Minister work against the corruption, in particular revealing the list of thefts of this call, and not only of this call-related things. There are other many criminal cases that the government is fighting. And I should say that the people in general supporting the current government who had disclosed all these criminal cases for the last 2-3 years, this Irdenet case, the same person, Prime Minister Irden was at that time, yeah, the cabinet member, cabinet chancellery, so cabinet secretary. So Erdenet case, this development bank scandal, and now this coal scandal, altogether, this prime minister is the only person who can complete this work. Not only because he had started that, also because he has confirming his commitment to deal completely with all this wrongdoing. So that's why the protesters demand him to continue his work. Meanwhile, now there is Security Council. They have been discussing the situation, and they almost once wanted to create the state of emergency, which luckily they did not. The people dispersed themselves, they denied. Now, but they have agreed to make a constitutional amendment, which they will do. They have to. And that constitutional amendment should have a really changing not only they call it structure, but it's not only a structure of the state where fair and full representative of each citizens in the parliament, which is not the case because People's Party got 40% of supports of voters, but they got 80% of seats. So definitely it says that we need to rechange the situation. And one thing is clear, Mongolia should move more to the parliamentarian directions rather than dual directions, what we have now, having president a lot of power. So this is one. Secondly, it's a matter of changing election system, as we have discussed. The third is what they need to do now is to discuss and adapt the new political parties' law, including the political party financing, which is to be transparent, which is already the source of major corruption in the country, because now the Democratic Party, People's Party members, they don't know how much their party is receiving money from where and how they're spending. And during the last election, it was talk about just to get ticket to be a member, to be candidate for parliament member, one had to pay 2.5 billion MNT to your political party. So whether it is exactly or not, that's the matter where people look for justice. So this kind of amendments we are expecting from the state, and this kind of transparency we need from political parties. That's why their Congress is so important for public.
And finally, do you have anything that you would like to say to the protesters, to the younger generation?
Certainly, it's good, and congrats with this hard work you do, and it's your job will accelerate the work of this cabinet to combat corruptions, and we should demand them every day to be faster. One. Secondly, we should demand this public hearing of the parliament to be immediately, not on December 21st, and immediately to reveal this off-take contracts of coal, 4 contracts. They should be immediately disclosed, and that must be done by the president, nobody else. So he must do it. So these 3 things, until it happens, people have to demand. There is no halfway to the truth. So I really thank you, demonstrants, protesters, who are really standing on their position stronger. Yes, at times there are people who are sparking all this stuff, in particular those who are to be at the court, and those who are stealing the coal, trying also, attempting to inflame somewhere, spark the demonstrators into the different directions. They want demonstrants go until the government is resigned, which would be the worst decision, because there will be never again a cabinet, at least before the election, who will fight with corrupt officials as much as this government. That's what will be my message.
Thank you for tuning into this week's Defacto Review, where we discuss the 3 most important topics of this week with economist and columnist Mr. Charles Sahin.
Thank you very much for watching us. See you next week.